Hello friends. Welcome to Luffy Fiction. How are you all? So in this video, we will see what if Luffy held the key to the sea's secrets. But before we start, if you want more amazing stuff like this, then be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Also, if possible, share this video with your friends. Now, without wasting any more time, let's begin the story. A day in the life. Ace's body itches with the familiar sting of open wounds. He hisses as the rough surface of whatever he's leaning against scrapes against them with every breath he takes. His eyes flicker weakly beneath their lids as he tries to figure out where he is and why he feels so incredibly weak. What had he been doing before this? Where is he? When had he gotten here, and how? His mind blearily searches his memories for answers, and what he finds makes his heart skip a beat. Dark eyes shoot open before wincing at the bright light that assaults his senses. The moment Ace's eyes adjust enough, his gaze immediately finds his own chest. And he wonders, why isn't there a hole? After what happened with Akainu, there should be a hole. And yet, he feels no pain, nor the tightness of a new scar. God, this has to be a dream. Can only be a dream. Are you finally awake, brat? A gruff voice asks. Ace's head shoots up so fast that he hears his neck crack. That voice is unmistakable, but there is no way it can actually be. Dayton, he stutters, before choking on the word. His voice, what is wrong with his voice? It's high, so much higher than it should be. He was too distracted before to pay any attention, but looking back down at his body he finds it's much tinier than he remembers. It's almost how he looked when he was a little kid, and then there is Dayton and he's dreaming about his childhood, isn't he? This is a dream. It's the only possible explanation. It has to be, since he's no longer drinking in the smoke and destruction of Marineford. But then, maybe that was a dream too. Yeah, you little shit. His eyes rove her familiar face, taking in the weather-beaten skin and wild orange hair before he notes that she had gotten beat up somewhat recently. Where am I? He asks distantly. What happened? Lightheaded from the blood loss, Dayton murmurs, mostly to herself. Well, brat, you're going to have to face up to this again sooner or later, and I don't plan to let you live in blissful ignorance. You need to hear this. He swallows and waits. Sabo is dead, she says bluntly. Dogra saw his boat get blown up. I know, Ace says, his brow furrowing. Why are you? I guess this is a dream, so it doesn't really matter. You're not dreaming, kid, Dayton replies, the roots of concern leaking into her voice. Right. Of course, he says dismissively as he cranes his neck to look around his childhood home. From the outside at least everything seems spot on. It's a little unnerving, but seeing this place again is soothing and nostalgic. Look, kid, I'm going to cut you down so you can get some rice and water in you, because honestly you're pretty out of it. I'll help you, but that's only if you promise not to attack me or anyone else in the hideout, okay? Okay, he says, eager to see things again. Don't. Okay. Me, brat, she growls. You went on a rampage. We're still fixing the floor. Okay. Gah. She grabs her knife and cuts through the ropes binding him to the tree. Ace lands a little unsteadily on his feet, but he straightens himself out before he starts walking. He enters through the back entrance of the base to reach the main area that doubled as the cooking room, where he remembers countless battles over food. He sees many of the bandits sitting around the room, but notices that they give him a wide berth. Ace ignores them. If he remembers correctly, they always tended to do that, way up until he was 16 or 17 and began behaving like the polite child he never was. Here, eat this before you pass out. Dayton shoves a bowl of rice into his small hands. He's a little surprised to see that the portion is larger than he remembers her ever giving him. He shoots her a curious look which she pointedly ignores and avoids. With a small shrug, Ace moves towards one of the walls and sits down to nurse his bowl of rice. He slowly eats his meal with his hands as he looks around the room. He has to admit that he is thoroughly impressed with his own memory. He's never had such an incredibly realistic dream before. The familiar dank smell of the bandits' hideout and then the rough grain of the wood that made up the floor filters through his senses relaxingly. The sting from his wounds is awfully realistic too, and Ace remembers that the cuts won't fully heal for a few days. Looking at his hands, he is still disconcerted by their small size. The same uncomfortable feeling goes for the rest of his body too. Ace doesn't remember ever being so perturbed by something while dreaming but shrugs it off. As he swallows the last bit of rice he looks up and finds himself facing a group of very nervous-looking bandits. Ace glances at them curiously, wondering why they are eyeing him with such wariness. He pauses as he is struck by a thought. If he remembers correctly, this is right after they told him that Sabo died, and also his subsequent snap. There's a pang in his heart, as there usually is, when he remembers his dead brother, but he deftly pushes it to the side. Well, that would explain why they're so frightened of him, he supposes. Ace. Dayton draws his attention. Of the bandits, she is the only one who doesn't look terrified. Instead, she has a gruff expression on her face that does little to muffle the concern in her eyes. "What's wrong with you?" she asks bluntly. "You don't eat this slow unless you're sick or dying. Is that why everyone's looking at him oddly?" A slow bright laugh builds in his chest and he chuckles alone for a few moments. His slow eating coupled with a lack of barbarism from exhaustion is what has them so freaked out. He forgot how much he used to frighten them. By the time he calms down, everyone has moved to the back wall, as far away from him as they can get. He puts a hand to his mouth to smother another laugh before it can escape. It's just too much. He smiles impishly as he stands and moves towards Dayton and the frightened bandits, before clearing his throat. "Thank you very much for the meal," he says formally, giving a small bow. He's glad he's facing the floor or else the bandits would see the wide smile that takes up his face as he hears small shouts of panic, frightened murmurs, and hushed prayers. He composes himself quickly and draws his face into the impeccably cool facade he remembers using a lot as a child. As he looks up blankly, they jump again. He smirks inwardly before he walks out the front door to explore. "Oi, Ace," Dayton stutters, and he obligingly turns to face her. She is clearly as bewildered as the rest of the group, but regains her brash nature quickly and manages to speak to him as belittlingly as he remembers her doing. "Go find Luffy. The kid hasn't eaten in 3 days. Ace frowns, but nods and starts running towards the cliff by the sea. He forgot that Luffy mourned differently than Ace, though just as dramatically. Ace remembers the panic he felt when he realized Luffy starved himself, and feels the ghost of it even now. It had been a tough time for both of them. Despite that pain, he's excited to see his annoying kid brother again, even if it is just 7-year-old version. Luffy was such a different kid back then, but the enthusiastic smile so unerringly bright and full of understanding and compassion that far surpassed his years would follow Luffy long after their childhood. Ace suddenly feels an even stronger urge to see his brother. He begins running faster. The blood loss and the aches from being tied up make him misstep and Ace tumbles to the ground. He sits up from the rough dirt in a haze. His legs hurt, so do his palms, which he sees that he's scraped on the ground. His hands are trembling as he looks at the blood on his palms and knees. It hurts a lot. Why does it hurt? He has never felt pain like this in a dream. The stings he feels from the smattering of wounds he already has on his childish body from the fight with Blue Jam are just a part of what he remembers. But Ace also feels this new pain. As he inhales and exhales rapidly he feels short of breath, something that surely has never happened in any of his dreams. Then perhaps this isn't a dream. As the memories of the war at Marineford keep flashing in his mind, he knows there is an alternative. It's entirely possible that he died and is dreaming about his childhood in death. Or something like that. He isn't too sure how this death thing works, but he supposes this isn't really overshooting the realm of possibilities or anything. So this is just a really weird afterlife, complete with pain and crystal clear memories. Ace shrugs to himself. It isn't as though he can prove otherwise. However, if this is true then it means he died and left little brother behind. He pushes himself up quickly, ignoring the sting of his wounds and begins pumping his arms and legs rapidly. The paths through the jungle are ingrained into his brain from all his years dashing through the greenery, so despite the time Ace spent away, he's able to quickly cut a path through the forest to the seaside. He bursts through the thick foliage of the forest and looks around frantically and spies a small figure of a boy resting on his back. A straw hat covers the boy's face, keeping it in shadows. Suddenly Ace needs to see Luffy, needs to feel his brother living against him. He almost lost Luffy. Akainu's fist had been so terrifyingly close to punching through his little brother's heart, and he had barely made it in time. Ace scrambles gracelessly to his brother, tripping in his haste over the uneven ground as he goes. He finally lands roughly beside Luffy and shakes his brother furiously. Luffy, oi! Luffy, wake up! Ace rattles the smaller boy fervently, knocking the straw hat to the side. Luffy groans as he shakes his head lightly and blearily opens his eyes. Onyx eyes that Ace knows so well blink a few times slowly as his brother wakes up. Ace, Luffy murmurs. Luffy. Ace smiles. He soaks in his brother's youthful appearance. Luffy looks identical to how he did when he was 7, right down to the smattering of bandages that cover his body. He exhales, taking refuge in the familiarity of this Luffy and the aliveness. Ace, where are we? Luffy asks in a dazed tone that is still muffled by sleep. Ace freezes. Something about Luffy isn't fitting with everything else. The confusion in his tone and the slight edge in his eyes. These eyes are more mature, like the eyes he saw at Marineford. But that's impossible because Ace is dead and... Ace, why are you so small? Luffy sits up and grabs Ace's hand, flipping it over in amazement. You're like a kid again. How did this happen? This is so cool. And you're alive. Oh my god, Ace. The last fact seems to have finally sunk into Luffy's head, and he leans forward and wraps his rubbery arms around his brother tightly. Luffy, but I mean. His little brother doesn't seem to hear him, too occupied with chanting a small mantra of Ace's name. I'm so happy to see Ace. I don't care if this is a dream, Luffy says, crushing Ace to him as much as possible. This isn't a dream, Luffy, Ace protests, gently shoving his younger brother off of him. I mean, I think so. Probably, maybe. But you're all tiny. So are you, Ace accuses. Luffy looks down and his eyes widen comically. You're right, he exclaims with shock. You are so dense. Luffy ignores the insult as he examines his new old body with undisguised fascination. So cool. It's like when I use Gear 3rd and shrink down like this. But this doesn't feel like that at all. So weird. His rambling makes no sense to Ace, so the older boy just ignores it. He wants to know why the Luffy from the future is here. Yeah, I know, it's weird, Ace says, impatient. But this is my afterlife, so what are you doing here? Your afterlife? Luffy asks before arguing back, is not. Of course this is my afterlife. This would be a shitty afterlife. Why would you wanna be at the bandit hideout as a little kid? Luffy asks. That's dumb. Why didn't you pick sailing on the seas with your nakama? Well, I didn't really pick any of this. I just woke up here. I guess I'm stuck. That beeps, Luffy says sympathetically. I know. Wait, Luffy exclaims, pointing an accusing finger at his brother, as if he was purposefully trying to throw him off track. This isn't the afterlife, anyways. Don't distract me. I didn't do anything, Luffy. Ace feels a headache building as he tries to sort through the knowledge. Why is he even bothering to correct his little brother? This version of Luffy is most likely a figment of his own mind. Why the hell his mind decided to have his brother's older brain in his younger body, Ace has no idea. This whole afterlife thing was starting to seem overly complicated. This isn't your afterlife, because if this was your afterlife, then why would I be here? Luffy demands. I remember everything that happened. You're probably a figment of my imagination, Ace answers flippantly, although he is finding it hard to argue against Luffy. Admittedly, he doesn't know what exactly happened, but he is pretty sure that Luffy is wrong. What? I'm not. Luffy protests, and Ace chuckles. Seeing his brother getting so outraged when Luffy he looks like a 7-year-old is pretty funny. So in this video, maybe that's why his subconscious chose to make Luffy the way he was. But before we start, could be some beat up version of amazing stuff like I'm not part of your mind. Then be sure to subscribe to our channel. I'm really like this video. Luffy cries. Also, if possible, share this video with your friends. Now, without wasting any more time, getting frustrated that Ace is ignoring him. A day in the life. Has to wonder how exactly that overly whiny familiar is supposed to convince him. He hisses as the rough surface of whatever he is leaning against. The ire from Luffy's face immediately fades, and a brimming smile spreads over his beneath their lids as he tries to figure out where he is and why he feels brother's mercurial moods. He watches as his little brother scoots back towards him and leans over to kiss the top of his forehead. His mind
Ace lets
literally
him,
searches his
knowing that
memories
there's
for
no
answers,
point in
and what he
questioning what
finds
his
makes
brother
his
does.
heart skip a beat.
Ace takes advantage of his closeness and ruffles Luffy's
bright light, eliciting a giggle from his 7-year-old brother. The moment Ace's eyes adjust enough,
shoulders shake
his
from
gaze
laughter,
immediately
and as the
finds
smaller
his own
boy
chest.
looks up,
Ace sees
and
he's
he
shaking
wonders
from tears
why,
as well.
Why isn't
I'm
there
really
a hole?
glad Ace is alive.
After what
you
happened
don't know
with
how
Akainu,
happy it
there
makes
should be
me,
a hole,
Luffy says.
and yet,
he
tears
feels
roll
no
down
pain,
his face,
nor the tightness
dripping
of
in
a
and
new
around
scar.
his smile.
God, the
This
oldest
has
of
to
the
be a
pair
dream.
feels an ache
Can
filled
only
in
be
his
a
chest,
dream,
because he
Are
isn't
you finally
alive.
awake, brat?
He didn't
A
survive.
gruff voice
He's
asks.
dead.
God,
Ace's head
what the
shoots
real
up
Luffy
so
must
fast
be
that
going
he hears
through
his
is
neck
unfathomable
crack.
to Ace.
That voice is
Despite
unmistakable,
that sympathetic
but there is
pain
no
crushing
way
his
it can
heart,
actually
his
be.
chest also throbs with
Dating.
unquestionable
He
joy,
stutters
and Ace is
before
helpless to
choking
stop
on the
it.
word. His
He
voice,
doesn't often
what
need
is wrong
reminding,
with his voice?
not like when
It's
he was a
high,
child,
so much
but
higher
hearing
than it
someone
should
say
be.
they are glad
He
he
was
is
too
alive always
distracted
makes
before to
warm
pay any
spring up
attention,
in his chest.
but looking back down at his
Growing up
body
the
he
way he
finds
did,
it's much
this
tinier
is the
than he
last thing
remembers.
he ever expected to
It's
hear.
almost how he looked
Ace
when he
is
was
dead
a little
now.
kid.
He knows
and then
that.
there is Dayton,
He
and
also knows
he's
that
dreaming
this
about
Luffy
his
isn't his
childhood,
Luffy,
isn't
but
he?
it looks like his Luffy.
This is a dream,
and
it's
he
the
also
only
knows
possible
that his Luffy would
explanation.
say it.
It has to
His
be.
brother said
Since
it
he's
before,
no longer
and
drinking
would have said
in the
it
smoke
again
and destruction
if he
of
ever had the
Marineford.
opportunity.
But then,
That's
maybe
just the
that
kind
was a
of guy
dream
that
too.
Luffy is.
Yeah,
Remembering that
shit.
fact only
His
makes
eyes
his heart
rogue
her
her
familiar
for
face,
the brother he left
taking in the
behind in his
weather-beaten
death.
skin and wild orange
Ace
hair
grasps
before he
Luffy
notes
and
that
pulls
she
him
had
tightly
gotten beat
into
up
his
somewhat
embrace.
recently. Ace tries to
Where
use
am
the
I?
warmth he
He
feels
asks
to negate the
distantly.
fathomless
What
self-loathing
happened?
that is festering within
Lightheaded
him.
from the blood loss.
The Luffy in his arms is more than willing to fall
mostly
into
to
his
herself
embrace and comfort him.
Well, brat, you're
It
going to
hadn't
have
really
to face
struck
up to
Ace
this
exactly
again
how
sooner or
close
later,
he had
and I
truly
don't plan
been
to
to
let
losing
you
his
live
little
in
brother.
blissful ignorance.
If
You
Ace
need to
had
hear
been a
this.
little slower and failed
He
to reach
swallows
Akainu's
and waits.
magma-laced
Sabo
fist
is
before
dead,
it reached
she
Luffy.
says
It's
bluntly.
too terrible to
Dogra
even
saw
imagine.
his boat get blown
He
up.
can't bear to
I know.
imagine it.
Ace says,
his grip tightens
brow
around his
furrowing.
little brother.
Why are you?
Never.
Ace.
I guess this
Luffy
is a dream,
asks
so it doesn't
tentatively.
really matter.
Ace realizes his
You're not
tempestuous
dreaming,
expression
kid.
is worrying
Dayton
his brother,
replies,
and he
the
quickly
roots of
soothes
concern
his
leaking
face.
into her voice. He exhales
Right.
calmingly.
Of course.
He prevented
He
that
says
fate from
dismissively
befalling
as he
his brother.
cranes his neck to
It's
look
all
around
okay.
his childhood
Ace
home.
trusts Jinbei to get
From
his
the
brother
outside,
out of
at
there,
least everything
and he trusts
seems
his
spot
brother's
on.
nakama
It's
to
a
pick
little
him up when
unnerving,
he falls
but
down.
seeing this place again is
Luffy,
soothing and
Luffy
nostalgic.
will be okay without
Look,
him.
Kid,
Ace could
I'm
never
going to
live
cut
in a
you down
world
so
without
you can
Luffy,
get some rice
but
and
Luffy,
water in you,
bright as he
because
is,
honestly
because
you're pretty
survive,
out of it.
and Ace takes refuge
I'll help
in the
you,
fact, but that's only
as
if you
for
promise
Ace's
not
second
to
family,
attack me or
he
anyone
shuts
else
his
in the
eyes to
hideout.
block out the
Okay.
images.
Okay,
You look
he
like you're
says,
thinking really
eager to
hard.
see things
A
again.
muffled voice says
Don't.
against his tank
Okay.
top.
Me,
Ace
brat,
realizes
she
that he
growls.
has been completely
You went
crushing
on a
his little
rampage.
brother against
We're
his
still
chest.
fixing the floor. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
Gah.
He
She
relaxes
grabs
his
her
grip,
knife and
but
cuts
doesn't
through
let
the ropes
go.
binding
The
him to
two
the
sit
tree.
face to face,
Ace
just
lands
staring
a
at
little
the other.
unsteadily on his feet.
Hey,
but he
Ace.
straightens himself
Luffy
out
puts a
before he
hand up
starts
towards
walking.
Ace's cheek. He enters through the
He
back
replies
entrance of the
easily.
base to reach
Don't
the main
cry.
area that
Okay.
doubled as the
Ace
cooking
blinks
room,
and
where
looks
he
down at
remembers
Luffy's
countless
hand,
battles
which
over
is
food.
suddenly glistening and wet.
He sees many of the
The
bandits
elder of
sitting
the pair
around
is
the room,
momentarily
but
stunned
notices
by the
that they
sight,
give him a
and
wide
suddenly
berth.
realizes that there is a
Ace
veritable
ignores
waterfall
them.
streaming
If he
from his
remembers
eyes.
correctly,
They
Luffy,
always tended
Ace
to do that,
cries as the
way up
events
until
crash
he was
down on
16
him.
or 17
The prison,
and began
the
behaving
war,
like the polite
his
child
rescue,
he never was.
his death.
Everyone
Here,
was
eat this
sacrificing
before you
themselves
pass
for me.
out.
Dayton
Dayton
shoves
shoves
a
a
bowl
bowl
of
of
rice into
The
his small
freckled
hands.
pirate falls short
He's
of
a little
breath as the
surprised
scope
to
of
see
what
that the
happened
portion
finally
is larger
hits him.
than he remembers her
The
ever
death
giving
count
him.
must have been
He
astonishing
shoots her
on
a
both
curious
sides,
look which she
he
pointedly
never wanted
ignores and
anyone
avoids.
to die, especially
With a
not
small
for him.
shrug,
Ace moves towards
Luffy's
one
soft
of the walls
utterance
and
brings
brings
down
Ace's
to
eyes
nurse
back
his bowl
to his
of
brother,
rice.
his bright,
He
shining
slowly
brother.
eats his meal with
It
his
isn't
hands
the
as he
real
looks
one.
around the
He
room.
knows that, and perhaps that
he has
fact
to admit
makes
that
it
he is
easier for
thoroughly
him to break
impressed
down
with
his own memory. Beyond that,
He's
the
never
fact
had
he
such
knows
an
this
incredibly
incredibly realistic
realistic dream
comforts him
before.
immensely. The familiar
It
dank
means that
smell of the
Luffy is
bandits,
still out there,
hideout,
alive.
and then the rough grain
I'm
of
so
the wood
glad
that
you
made
are
up the
alive.
floor
Ace
filters
chokes
through
out.
his senses
Luffy
relaxingly.
starts opening his mouth.
The sting from
but
his
his
wounds
cuts
is
him off
awfully
as he
realistic
plows on.
too, and Ace remembers
life
that the
had
cuts
meaning.
won't fully
Luffy,
heal for a few days.
It already did.
Looking
Luffy
at
says,
his hands,
and now
he
he's
is
crying
still
too.
disconcerted by their
Your
small
dream,
size.
Ace. You
the
became
same
a
uncomfortable
famous,
feeling
awesome
goes
pirate
for
with
the
an
rest
awesome
of his
crew
body
and a
too.
huge bounty.
Everyone
Ace doesn't
knew you were
remember
there.
ever being so
You
perturbed
were
by
so,
something while dreaming, but shrugs it off.
You did
As
it,
he
Ace.
swallows the
You
last
did
bit
it.
of rice, he looks
No,
up and
Luffy,
finds himself
in the end
facing
it
a
didn't
group
matter
of very
that I was a famous
nervous-looking
pirate.
bandits. Ace
Ace
exhales,
glances at them
feeling a
curiously,
sense of calm
wondering
settling
why
in his
they are
body.
eyeing him with such wariness.
But that was your dream.
He
To have
pauses
proof
as he
of
is
your
struck by a
existence.
thought.
If he
You were my
remembers
proof.
correctly,
Luffy,
this is right
Ace
after
says
they
softly
told him
and
that
fondly.
Sabo died, and
Luffy's
also his
argumentative
subsequent snap.
expression jolts to a
There's
stop,
a pang in his
frozen
heart,
by the reply,
as there usually is,
well,
when he remembers
not you,
his dead
but
brother.
you,
But
he
he
deftly
clarifies
pushes it
before
to
a
the
gentle
side.
smile grows
Well,
over his face.
that would explain why they're
because
so
I know
frightened
that
of
you're
him,
alive
he
out there
supposes.
pursuing your dream.
I know that
Ace,
my life
Dayton
had meaning.
draws his attention.
His little
Of the
brother's
bandits,
mouth opens
she
and
is the
closes
only one
repeatedly
who
as he
doesn't
just
look stares
stares
at Ace,
and the latter
Instead,
starts wondering
she
if
has
he
a
had
gruff
broken
expression
his
on her
imaginary
face
Luffy.
that does little to muffle the
Thicker
concern
tears
in her
begin
eyes.
pouring out of Luffy's
What's
eyes,
wrong
and the
with
expression
you?
on his
She
face
asks
is so pained and
bluntly.
inexplicable
You don't eat
that
this
Ace
slow
is at a total
unless you're
loss.
sick or dying. The
Is
distress,
that why
at
everyone's
least,
looking
is
at him
clear to
oddly?
see.
Even
A
if
slow
the
bright
rest
laugh
isn't,
builds
and
in
so
his
Ace
chest
just
and he
grabs
chuckles
his brother
alone for a
close
few
again and
moments.
pets his hair. His slow
This
eating
action
coupled with a
sets
lack
off a
of
barbarism
barbarism
from
from
exhaustion
exhaustion
is
is what has them
It's
so
all
freaked
right.
out. I'm here. He
forgot
forgot how
how
much
much
he
words
used
to
over and
frighten
over
them.
again until
By
his
the time
brother's
he
sobs
calms
begin
down,
to peter out.
everyone has moved to the back
Eventually,
wall,
when his
as far
brother
away
falls
from
from
him
him
as they can get.
Ace lets his motions
He
stop
puts a
and
hand
just
to his mouth
rests
to
his hand
smother
on
another
his
laugh
brother's head
before it can escape.
Luffy looks up
It's
at him,
just too
eyes
much.
determined.
He smiles
though watery.
impishly as he stands
Never
and
leave
moves
me
towards
again.
Dayton
You
and the
couldn't
frightened
make
bandits.
me.
Before
The two sit
clearing
on the
his
cliff
throat.
side for several hours.
Thank you
just
very
murmuring
much
little
for the
things
meal,
every now
he says
and then as they
formally,
lie
giving
on the
a
grass
small
together.
bow.
He's
Luffy
glad
clings
he's
to
facing
Ace's
the
side
floor, or else
fiercely,
the bandits
and
would
Ace
see
has
the
an
wide
objective
smile
in the
that
slightest,
takes up his
craving
face
the
as he hears
closeness
small
himself,
shouts of
although
panic,
the rocks
frightened
and
murmurs
grass
do
and
dig
hushed
into his
prayers.
already aching body. He composes himself
It isn't
quickly
until
and
Luffy's
draws his
stomach
face
growls
into the
that the two
impeccably
remember
cool
the
facade
outside
he
world.
remembers using a lot as
Why
a child.
don't we get something to
As
eat?
he looks up
Ace
blankly,
suggests with
they
a smile
jump again.
as he stands,
He smirks
sticking a
inwardly
hand
before
out to
he
his
walks
brother.
out the front door to
Yeah.
explore. Luffy grins
Oi,
and pulls himself
Ace.
up.
Dayton
The pair
stutters,
trot
and
through
he
the familiar
obligingly
woods
turns to
together,
face her.
exploring the details
She is
that had
clearly
grown
as
blurry
bewildered
in
as
their
the
time
rest
away.
of the group,
but
the
regains her
forest is
brash
much
nature
younger than it
quickly
was
and
when
manages
Ace
to
left
speak
at
to him as
17.
belittlingly as he
Which
remembers
makes
her
sense
doing.
seeing as it was 7
Go
years
find
earlier
Luffy.
than when he had
the kid
first
hasn't
left.
eaten in 3 days.
Still,
the
Ace
level
frowns,
of detail in
but
everything
nods and
he
starts
sees
running
still stuns
towards
him.
the cliff by the sea.
Luffy oohs and ahs
He
in
forgot
delight
that
as they
Luffy
dash
mourned
through the
differently than
complex
Ace,
network of
though
branches,
just as dramatically,
roots, and vines that
Ace
had been their
remembers the
childhood.
panic he felt when
His
he
little
realized
brother
Luffy
never
starved
strays far
himself
from Ace's
and feels
side,
the ghost
and
of it
Ace
even
doesn't
now.
want him to. It had been a
Ah,
tough time
I wonder
for both
if
of
our
them.
fort survived.
Despite that
Luffy
pain,
ponders aloud.
he's excited to see
It
his
should be
annoying
fine.
kid brother
If
again.
I remember
even
right,
if
it
it's
is
just a little
7-year-old
from the
version.
fire. Ace replies,
Luffy was
shielding
such a
the
different
sun from
kid
his
back
eyes.
then.
But the
It
enthusiastic
isn't very
smile
far
so
away from
unerringly
here,
bright and full of understanding
I
and
dunno.
compassion that
If
far
I wanted,
surpassed his
see it
years
right
would
now.
follow Luffy
Ace
long
looks
after
at
their
Luffy
childhood.
sideways before nodding.
Ace suddenly
Then
feels
we
an
don't
even
have
stronger
to.
urge to
The
see his
event of
brother.
Sabo's death
He
is
begins
suddenly
running
so
close
close
to
to
them. The blood
Ace
loss
will
and the
pretend
aches
for
from
being
being
tied
tied
up
up
isn't
make him
bothered
misstep
anymore
and
by
Ace
what
tumbles
happened
to
to
the ground.
Sabo.
He
To
sits
himself,
up from the
though,
rough dirt
he
in a
doesn't
haze.
try and hide
His
exactly
legs
how
hurt.
much he
So
still
do his
can't
palms,
reconcile the
which he
injustice
sees that he's scraped on the
He'd
ground.
finally moved past
His
it at
hands
last,
are trembling
but now
as he
that they are
looks at
back
the blood
here,
on
a
his
few
palms and
days
knees.
from when it happened.
The emotions
hurts
long
a lot.
since buried are
Why
being
does it
dredged
hurt?
up from within
He has
him
never
until
felt
they rest
pain
just
like this
below
in a
the
dream.
skin.
The
Ace
stings
doesn't
he
feel
feels
like
from the
letting them out
smattering of
any
wounds
time
he
soon.
already has on his
The
childish
look on
body
Luffy's
from the
face
fight
is
with Blue Jam
complex,
are just
and
a
Ace
part
knows
of what
that
he
affects him
remembers.
significantly too. But Ace also
Come
feels
on,
this new pain.
let's find you
As
something
he
to
inhales
eat.
and
Ace
exhales
says,
rapidly,
distracting
he feels
his
short
brother
of breath
and himself
something that
from the
surely has
melancholy
never
thoughts.
happened in any of his dreams.
As expected,
Luffy
then
perks
perhaps
right up
this
and
isn't a
turns an
dream,
excited expression
as the memories
towards
of
his
the
brother
war at
Marineford keep
Food.
flashing in his mind.
What do you want?
He knows there is
Alligator.
an alternative. Luffy explains.
It's
entirely possible
All right,
that he died
let's
and is
go to
dreaming
the
about
swamps
his
then.
childhood in death.
Try not to get eaten,
or
Luffy.
something like
Ace
that.
says with a
he
teasing
isn't
smile.
too sure how this death
Not
thing
that
works,
he would ever
but
let
he
that
supposes
happen,
this isn't
but the
really
affronted
overshooting the
expression
realm
on
of
Luffy's childish
possibilities or
face is
anything.
too funny.
So this is
Shut
just
up.
a really
It
weird
only
afterlife,
happened twice.
complete with
21.
pain and crystal
Luffy,
clear memories.
Ace corrects,
As
Ace
the duo
shrugs
jump
to
through the
himself.
jungle. It isn't as though
Was
he
not.
can prove
Ace
otherwise.
just smiles
However,
and enjoys the
if this is
simplicity
true,
of it
then
all.
it means he died
The amount
and
of
left
time
little
it
brother
takes
behind.
them to wrangle their dinner is
He pushes
absolutely
himself
pitiful.
up quickly,
It scarcely
ignoring
takes
the
more
sting
than
of
10
his
minutes
wounds and begins pumping
Ace
his arms
wonders
and
how
legs
weak he
rapidly.
must have been as a child
The paths
to have
through
actually
the jungle
struggled
are
somewhat
ingrained
to
into
catch
his
his
brain
meal
from
from all his years
Though
dashing
Ace no
through the
longer
greenery,
possesses
so
the
despite the
Marinara
time
no
Ace
Mai,
spent away,
he's enough of a
able
threat
to
through
quickly
brute
cut a
strength
path
and
through the
battle
forest
instinct
to the
alone.
seaside.
He isn't
bursts
nearly
through
as
the
strong
thick
as he was
foliage
as
of
an
the
adult
forest
though.
and looks around frantically
Ace forgot
and
how
spies a
weak
small
his body
figure of a
had
boy
been at
resting
this
on
age,
his back.
but weak as he is,
A
it
straw
still
hat
had covers
cakewalk
the
to get
boy's
the
gaze,
gators.
keeping it in shadows.
His little brother doesn't struggle
Suddenly
either.
Ace needs
Luffy's
to see
control
Luffy,
is far
needs to
superior
feel his
to
brother
how Ace
living
remembers
against him.
being as a child.
He almost lost
confirming
Luffy's
Ace's
hypothesis
Akainu's
that the
fist
iteration
had been
of
so
Luffy in front
terrifyingly
of him
close
was
to
completely
punching
the
through
same
his
as the
little
one he
brother's
left
heart,
behind,
and he had barely made
Ace
it
still
in time.
doesn't quite know what to
Ace
think of that
scrambles
particular
gracelessly
detail
to his brother.
By the
Tripping in
time
his
the
haste
sun is
over the
beginning to
uneven
set,
ground as
they
he
have
goes.
5 large alligators
He
to
finally
show for
lands
their effort.
roughly beside Luffy
Ace
and
gives
shakes
Luffy
his brother
3
when he
furiously.
remembers that at
Luffy,
this time in the
oi,
past,
Luffy,
his little brother
wake
hasn't
up.
eaten
Ace
in 3
rattles
days.
the smaller boy fervently,
Luffy devours
knocking
all
the
three
straw hat to the
alligators in
side.
record time.
Luffy
Ace
groans
sees how
as he
Luffy
shakes
eyes
his
his
head
own
lightly and
alligators and
blearily
sighs
opens
before
his
giving
eyes.
him the tail.
Onyx eyes
They
that
can
Ace
always
knows
catch
so
a
well
bigger
blink a
quarry
few
tomorrow
times
for
slowly
breakfast.
as his brother wakes
Luffy's
up.
lack of eating certainly
Ace,
concerns
Luffy
Ace more
murmurs,
than his still
Luffy,
partially empty
Ace
stomach.
smiles.
He soaks
After
in
their
his
dinner,
brother's
the
youthful
duo
appearance.
decides to head
Luffy
back to
looks
the bandits'
identical to
hideout
how
to
he
get
did
some
when
rest.
he was 7. right
Luffy
down to the
is
smattering
bouncing
on
bandages
his heels
that
that
cover
cover
his
his
body
body as they walk.
He
Ace
exhales,
understands
taking
his brother's
refuge
feelings,
in the familiarity
seeing
of
their
this
old
Luffy
home
and the
is beyond
aliveness.
nostalgic.
Ace,
Even
where are
seeing
we?
Dayton is sort
Luffy
of nice,
asks in a
which
dazed
Ace never
tone
thought
that
he'd
is still
say.
muffled by sleep.
Luffy fills the
Ace
silence
freezes,
with his genial
something
babble,
about
continually
Luffy isn't
soothing
fitting with
Ace's
everything
mood.
else.
Ace
The
laughs
confusion
along
in his
with
tone
Luffy's
and the slight
grand
edge
motions
in his
and
eyes.
over-the-top
These eyes are
exaggerations.
more mature,
like the
he's
eyes he
beginning
saw
to
at
think that the
Marineford.
lying sharpshooter
But
rubbed
that's
off on his
impossible
little
because
brother.
Ace is
But
dead.
then again,
Most
Ace,
of Luffy's
why are you
stories
so
stretch
small?
beyond the average
Luffy
person's
sits up
scope
and
of
grabs Ace's
imagination,
hand,
so no one
flipping
could
it
ever
over
know
in
if it's
amazement.
hyperbole or the truth.
You're like a kid again.
Dayton, how
Luffy's
did this
fond
happen?
cry draws
This is
Ace's
so
attention
cool.
to the
And
bulky
you're
figure
alive.
blocking
Oh
the
my
doorway.
God.
Ace.
Luffy
The last
attaches
fact
himself
seems
to
to
her
have finally
impressive
sunk
girth and
into
hugs
Luffy's
her
head,
excitably,
and he leans
She's
forward and
obviously
wraps his
surprised
rubbery
by
arms
Luffy's
around
warm
his
welcome,
brother tightly,
but hides it under her
Tell
typical
Luffy,
bluster.
but I mean,
What are
his
you
little
two
brother
doing here?
doesn't seem to hear
Dayton
him,
grunts,
too occupied
blushing
with
with chanting
chanting
a small
and fails
mantra
to
of
push
Ace's
an
name.
affectionate Luffy off of her.
I'm so happy to see Ace.
Didn't you move
I
out?
don't care if this
We're
is a
bunking
dream,
here tonight,
Luffy says,
Ace states
crushing
calmly.
Ace to him as much
You
as
can't
possible.
just barge in here and say
This
that.
isn't a dream,
Dayton
Luffy
snaps.
Ace protests.
Yes, I can.
Gently shoving
Please.
his younger brother
His
off
lack
of him.
of violent reaction
I mean,
visibly
I think
unnerves
so.
her.
Probably.
Luffy joins
maybe.
in from his
But
place
you're
on
all
her
tiny.
hip.
So are
Please
you.
see.
Ace
You're
accuses.
both damned
Luffy
leeches.
looks down
Dandin
and
mutters
his eyes
and both
widen
boys
comically.
know they have won.
You're right.
But
He
you two had
exclaims
better
with
bathe
shock.
before you
were
take
so
another
dense.
step in this house.
Luffy ignores the
She
insult as he
declares.
examines his
No.
new old body
Ace
with
sees the dark
undisguised
bags
fascination.
under his little brother's
So
eyes and
cool.
feels the
It's
sluggish
like
drag
when I
of his
use
own
depleted
depleted
energy
and shrink
reserve.
down like this.
Both of them
But
need
this
to just
doesn't
sleep
feel
above
like
all
that
at
at
all.
all.
So
No.
weird.
Dayton
His rambling
overreacts
makes
as
no
she often
sense to
does.
Ace, so the older
As
boy
Ace
just
expects,
ignores it.
His little brother
He wants
completely
to know
backs
why
him
the
up
Luffy
simply
from
for
the
the principle
principle
of
of
it.
it.
Yeah,
I
Luffy
know.
pops
It's
the
weird.
Ace says,
We're both
impatient.
really tired, Dayton.
But this
Can
is
we
my
argue
afterlife.
about this later.
So what are you doing here?
Ace isn't lying either.
Your afterlife.
He spent 2
Luffy
weeks in
asks
agonizing
before arguing
captivity,
back.
fought
Is
in a
not.
war,
Been
of course
killed,
this is my
reunited
afterlife.
with his little brother.
This would
and
be a
cried
shitty
more than he
afterlife.
ever wants to admit.
Why would you wanna?
Ace
Be
is
at the
ready to
bandit
turn
hideout
for the
as a
night.
little kid.
You,
Luffy
Boss,
asks.
Magra murmurs
That's
from the
dumb.
side.
Why didn't
gently
you pick
poking
sailing
Dayton
on
with
the
his
seas
elbow.
with your nakama?
They're probably
I
exhausted
didn't
after
really pick
everything
any
he
of
with
this.
saw.
I
He
just
cuts
woke
himself
up
off
here.
and his eyes
I
flicker
guess
to
I'm
Ace
stuck.
nervously. That beeps.
Dayton
Luffy
grunts
says
but
sympathetically.
sympathetically.
I
All
know.
right.
But if
Wait,
you break the floor
Luffy
again, you can
exclaims,
sleep in the
pointing
jungle
an
for the
accusing
bears
finger
to
at
eat
his
for all
brother,
I care.
as if he was purposefully
Thanks,
trying to throw
Dayton.
him off track.
Luffy exclaims as
This
he
isn't
finally
the
detaches.
afterlife.
Anyways,
Thanks.
Don't
Dayton.
distract
Ace
me.
gives her a cheeky
I didn't
grin
do
as she
anything.
winces at his
Luffy.
polite words.
Ace feels a headache
Ace
building
is really
as he tries
enjoying
to
messing
sort
with
through
her
the
and the
knowledge.
rest of the bandits.
Why is he even bothering
Luffy and
to
Ace
correct
climb
his little
up to the
brother?
room on the second
This
floor
version
where
of
Luffy
Luffy
and
is
Sabo
most
used
likely
to
a
sleep
figment
when
of
they
his
stayed
own
with
mind.
the outlaws.
Why the hell has
After
mind
getting
getting
into
so
so
many
many
brothers
fights in the
older
common
brain
sleeping
in his
area,
younger body?
Dayton
Ace
finally
has no
gave the
idea.
3 brothers their own
This
room.
whole
If only
afterlife thing
she
was
could
starting
sleep
to seem
soundly at
overly
night.
complicated. Not that
This
it helped
isn't
at
your
all when they
afterlife,
broke
because
the
if
floor
this
over
was
her
your
head one
afterlife,
night.
then why would I
It
be
all
here?
seems so far away
Luffy
now.
demands.
Despite
I
how
remember
familiar
everything that
everything
happened.
is, there are
You're
enough
probably a
differences
figment
to
of
throw
my
Ace off
imagination.
balance. Ace answers flippantly.
Both boys
although
are
he is
physically
finding
and
it
very
hard to argue
emotionally
against
drained.
Luffy. Ace falls
Admittedly,
backwards
he
onto
doesn't
the
know
floor
what
with a light
exactly
thump.
happened,
But
he
he
lies
is pretty
on
sure
his
that
back,
Luffy is
staring
wrong.
at the familiar dirty
What?
ceiling.
I'm not.
Luffy
Luffy crawls
protests,
over near
and
Ace.
Ace chuckles.
He carefully places his hat to the side so he won't squish it in his sleep, but as ever, his precious treasure is well within arm's reach. After that he lays down near Ace, holding his arm out in a silent request. Ace grants it immediately and pulls his little brother towards him so that his dark head is resting on Ace's shoulder. The familiarity of the position soothes both of them. Ace, Luffy says. Ace murmurs, on the precipice of unconsciousness. Promise me you'll be here in the morning. Ace pauses before he replies. Of course. Without another word the two drift off into sleep. The next morning Ace wakes slowly in the sunlight. There's already loud sounds coming from downstairs, not that he really notices. He's more preoccupied by the pair of rubber arms that have apparently wrapped around his torso 3 times sometime during the night. Ace tugs at the stretchy skin, seeing if Luffy will let go of him easily. As his little brother continues snoring away, Ace figures he'll have to smack his brother awake. Ace stays his
his hand as he remembers everything that happened. This is probably the quietest Luffy will be all day, and Ace decides to take advantage of it so he can order his thoughts. To be perfectly honest, Ace is a little surprised that he's still here. He half expected to wake up in a void or rise from the strange dream. He didn't though. He's still right where he'd been last night. It's reassuring to him because not only has he told the truth to his little brother, but it also means they can spend time together jumping through the jungle, just like they did in the past. Maybe his afterlife isn't as substandard as he initially thought. His memories with Luffy when they were both kids are certainly his most precious, so perhaps the decision to come back to this time and place isn't as random as it appears. He smiles in anticipation. Ace. The freckled boy's eyes shift to his little brother, whose face is furrowed in distress. 7-year-old Luffy never had an expression like that, which only reminds Ace of the strange situation. This Luffy really behaves like he saw his brother die. Ace exhales sharply. Even though he knows that the Luffy beside him is a figment from his mind, Ace is still pained at the very thought of his brother's grief. He knows that it's very likely a reflection of what the real Luffy is going through as well, although the Luffy back in the real world does have his Nakama to guide him back. This Luffy, well, Ace will just have to comfort him, won't he? Oh, Luffy, Ace murmurs, petting his little brother's hair. Instead of calming Luffy down like Ace hoped, his little brother begins squeezing him even tighter. Hands loop over his arms quickly, and before Ace realizes it's happening, the former Whitebeard pirate finds himself trussed up by his little brother. His chest is being squeezed fiercely, and Ace wishes he had the Mera powers. He doesn't want Luffy to get burned, but being solid really beeps. Luffy, Ace shouts, trying to wiggle out of his brother's rapidly tightening grasp. He growls in irritation as his brother sleeps on, unaware that he is slowly cutting off Ace's air supply. Ace brings his head back as far as he can before slamming it into his little brother's face. Luffy's neck extends farther than is natural and Ace has to dodge the recoil. The grip stops tightening though, and Luffy groggily opens his eyes. Ace. Yeah, I'm here, Ace grunts. Can you let go of me now? I sort of need to breathe, he says, voice strained. Luffy's arms unwind from his body but he doesn't fully let go. His hands still rest on Ace, making the older boy look at him. Dark eyes stare blankly at Ace, unblinking and intense. What is it? Ace asks, concern leaking into his voice. I thought it was a dream, Luffy says after a pause. The realistic behaviors and reactions from the afterlife version of his brother still catches Ace off guard. Nah, I'm still here, little brother. Luffy finally smiles his wide, familiar grin that Ace happily returns. The brightness of the morning can't be dampened even when Dayton irritably shouts up the stairs for them to get off their lazy asses and do some laundry. The two exchange looks before breaking out into snickers. Wordlessly Ace goes over to the window and opens it before leaping down, Luffy right behind him. They begin sprinting away from the hideout even though they don't have to run to get away. Breakfast, Luffy exclaims excitedly, as the affronted shouts and threats from Dayton begin fading. Bear, Ace suggests. Bear, Luffy shouts, looking through you. It's been years since Ace and Luffy were children, but somehow, their old habits slide right into place, like he and Luffy never truly left them behind. The two brothers wake up with the sun in the morning, and then run away from Dayton as she hoots and hollers at them. After a feast of whatever creatures they crave from the jungle, they practice fighting with each other. Neither take the battles seriously in the slightest. Ace is still adjusting to being permanently permeable. Despite his new handicap to his fighting style, he's still able to dance out of the way of Luffy's attacks and knock the rubber boy over. Luffy never gets cross, like he did in their childhood. Instead, Luffy, covered in dirt and or grass and whatever else was on the jungle floor where Ace knocked him, grins and demands another fight and another. Ace has to reinstate their old limit of 100 fights per day because they spend hours and hours just mock battling each other. If Luffy got his way, they would fight for whole days at a time. After sparring, the two break for a late lunch, and spend the rest of the time exploring their old childhood haunts. They wander up and down the snowy mountains, hunting the tigers that sometimes dwell there and have multiple snowball fights that, despite Luffy's extreme rubbery advantage, Ace still manages to win the vast majority of. They reacquaint themselves with the younger jungle, generally stumbling over the slight changes as they go. The more time they spend there though, the more right the jungle feels. The jungle is home again. They don't just revisit their old childhood hangouts. Ace and Luffy go to new places, starting with visiting Fuchsia Village, something they never actually attempted in their childhood. Garp will probably kill them if he finds out, but Ace figures they should be safe from his visits for a while still. The first time they visit, Luffy starts crying the moment he sees Makino, and Ace nearly cries too. She looks exactly like he remembers, right down to her shiny green hair and the kindness in her eyes. Both boys spend a lot of time with her in that visit, barely separating themselves from her if they can, even going so far as to follow her into the kitchen when she volunteers to make them something to eat. Makino laughs gently at their behavior, and assures them that they are free to visit her whenever they like. And so they do. At least twice a week the duo passes through the jungle to Fuchsia village and visit with their mother figure. Every time, Makino receives them with open arms. The rest of the village doesn't take their continued presence as easily. Although some of the villagers remember Luffy, mostly due to Garp, none of them have ever seen or even heard of Ace. They're distrustful at first, but his protectiveness of Luffy gradually wins them over. Not that Ace cares. Makino is the only reason he comes here. She was one of the bright spots in his early interactions with people. In fact, she was the first actual lady he'd ever gotten acquainted with. Deiden doesn't count for obvious reasons. He quickly asks her for manner lessons, much like he did in the past. Partially he does it out of a desire to have an explanation for his often preferred formal speech, but also just as an excuse to spend time with her. Makino agrees instantly and is delightedly surprised by his quick uptake, which Ace feels slightly sheepish about. Ace also presses Luffy into getting a few lessons himself. Luffy pouts, and whines when Ace makes the suggestion, but eventually caves without too much fuss. Ace figures that secretly Luffy wants time with Makino too. Luffy grudgingly learns the lessons, only so that if he ever has to ask for things on his crew's behalf he can do it properly. Later, in private, Ace asks if he's speaking of something in particular, and Luffy tells him about how his doctor joined. Ace can't help but feel proud of his little brother and his quiet humbleness. He also asks if Makino will help his little brother read better. Luffy can read, but he can't read very well. Ace himself learned his more advanced vocabulary from Marco, who read often in his personal time. Currently neither boy has access to books, so Ace nudges Luffy towards Makino, who is, unsurprisingly, quite well read herself. Makino struggles to teach his brother, not because Luffy can't grasp the concepts, but because he's so easily distracted. Ace brings a plate of meat into the lessons one day and tells Luffy that if he can read the passages Makino prescribes correctly, then he will get a piece. Ace means it mostly as a joke, but it's so startlingly effective that Ace continues doing it every lesson. Makino just shakes her head at them and chuckles. Thus, Luffy grudgingly works through the better part of Makino's collection. The adventure books in Makino's shelves cushion the blow of having to read so much, and Luffy does enjoy them. Despite that, Ace knows Luffy will never be a big reader, too impatient, too excitable, and too intent on living to be a scholar, but at least he understands concepts more easily. The mountain bandits' hideout becomes another new playground. Both Ace and Luffy try and prank the bandits while remaining unseen. They're caught more often than not, and laugh with delight when Deiden chases after them. The bandits still aren't used to the new, polite version of Ace, and both he and Luffy get a kick from making them squirm uncomfortably. Deiden manages to take everything in stride, although Ace does catch her looking at him sideways sometimes. One place the duo steers clear of is Gray Terminal. It's still too close to the destruction and fire. Skeletons and charred remains can be found still among the dirt and ashes. Not to mention the thick stench that Ace remembers never fully faded away even years after the event. The pair fill their days with adventuring, fighting, laughing, and just being together. Ace cherishes each and every moment of it. Their nights, on the other hand, are different. At night, the dark shadows that lead in both Ace's and his brother's minds crawl out into the moonlight and assault them endlessly. As they always did in their childhood, the two sleep tangled together in a familial heap, but somewhere along the way it becomes a necessity, they soon realize. The one occasion where they tried to sleep apart because Ace had caught a mild cold, Luffy jolted awake with a nightmare. The still somewhat unfamiliar surroundings, coupled with the blood-caked memories, startled him so badly that he became violently sick. Ace can't say he's much better when he wakes from a nightmare. The first thing he reaches for is his rubbery brother, because it's the only thing that soothes his troubled mind. They need to be close. At least when the two are together they can immediately calm themselves and each other down. After Luffy had thrown up though, Deiden reaches the end of her rope and the two are forced to move back into their base. Both know that they should have moved out of the bandits, hideout much sooner because of the constant nightmares, but they were avoiding the base. Sabo is there. Sabo is all over that place. No matter how many years pass, going to their old home brings everything back to the surface. Ace sees the extreme look of confliction on Luffy's face whenever the topic of their other brother comes up, so he avoids it when he can. No more though. The day they move in is one of complete silence. Neither Luffy nor Ace say a word as they move their meager collection of things back in. They catch dinner and then turn in for the night. It's only when Luffy begins shouting in horror that the silence is shattered. At least there's no one nearby to see the two boys curling up in pain beside each other, Luffy trembling furiously inside of Ace's tight grip or Ace fiercely clutching his brother against himself, desperately in need of comfort. Neither of them can bear being very far apart from each other, day or night. Neither go hunting on their own. Neither will bathe on their own. Neither eat alone. And certainly neither can sleep alone. Makino notices it and comments on it, but a sad look of understanding quickly covers her face. Ace tries to smother the slight guilt he feels because no, she doesn't. None of them understand either boy anymore. The only person to understand Ace is Luffy, and vice versa. Luffy and Ace often talk about their adventures and friends. Ace enjoys it a lot because it helps him keep all of his friends in his mind. He often wonders what they're doing in the real world. Oddly enough, Luffy tends to ask Ace more about his adventures, as opposed to talking about his own, which Ace certainly finds alarming, since his brother is generally self-centered in that respect. He chalks it up to his afterlife subconscious thing. He figures that coming up with believable adventures for Luffy to go on is a little too challenging for his subconscious to imagine. He also considers that this Luffy's behaviors are slightly influenced by his mind, making him a little less self-centered and a little more aware. Most of the time though, Ace barely notices the difference because of how identical this Luffy acts to the original. It's hard remembering that this Luffy isn't actually his own Luffy. The boy is bright and vibrant and inexplicable in all the ways Ace remembers. He knows it isn't really Luffy, but that doesn't stop him from treating this version like it is him. The warmth is so similar that Ace sometimes forgets. He always wished he could help Luffy read better because he was continually ashamed how little he could teach his little brother when they were growing up. He protects this Luffy from every harm, as he always did the original. And he loves this Luffy just the same, despite how he knows this Luffy isn't real. He spends time, and teases this Luffy with the same jokes because it makes Luffy smile, and when Luffy smiles, Ace smiles. Even though he knows that none of this is real, and it's all in his mind, it feels real, and what's so bad about pretending, anyways? Though Ace knows he's dead, he cherishes each and every day with his brother. He wakes each morning, incredibly relieved to find that he's still here, unquestionably joyful that he has another day with Luffy. Time is so fluid that Ace barely notices the passing of the days. He does notice though, that Luffy slowly grows more and more restless. Ace wonders what the problem is. They don't do anything different during the day, and he sees the genuine joy in Luffy's smiles and laughs. Despite that, he sees the anticipatory twitching of his brother's body and the agitated look in Luffy's eyes. His little brother's nightmares are also beginning to get out of control as 4 nights out of the week Ace is woken up by choked sobs and apologies. As ever, he soothes his brother until the younger can fall asleep, but as time wears on, more and more often he finds himself staring at the ceiling, utterly perturbed by his brother's increasing distress. Ace gently presses his little brother for information, but is always evaded with a smile and a simple, yet sad shake of the head. Luffy then pulls Ace into the jungle and that is the end of that. Even if this isn't really his brother, Ace still feels the urge, no, the need, to help. He's also curious as to why this figment of his brother is behaving this way at all. If it is Ace's subconscious like he guesses, then why is it making Luffy get sadder and more stressed as time draws on? Not that he would ever know just by seeing his brother in the sunlight, bright and cheerful as ever. Who exactly is in control of this imagined brother of his? Ace toys with the theory that perhaps the Luffy copy is responding to his guilt concerning leaving his actual brother behind. Ace dearly wanted to comfort Luffy after his death, so it's possible that his subconscious is allowing him to do so with his own Luffy copy. Despite that, Ace has a sneaking suspicion that there is something deeper than just his death stirring around in his brother's brain. The devastated and self-loathing looks that occasionally appear in Luffy's eyes speak of a pain that goes beyond just the loss of a brother, even if the brother is beyond precious. Besides, the two are together again. If it was just Ace, then Luffy should be improving instead of getting worse. But he isn't. Ace wants to soothe his little brother, but he doesn't know how he's supposed to help, seeing as much of what happened to Luffy on his adventures remains a mystery to him. Ace doesn't even know if his subconscious can actually create a story for this Luffy. How can he ask about things his brain doesn't know? There is one thing that he knows of and that his brother saw. It's also the only way he knows to get his brother to work past his death. It's an unspoken agreement that neither of them ask about Marineford. The topic is taboo for both of them. There's too much pain. Ace rolls the idea around in his head for weeks. Every time he opens his mouth to bring up the conversation though, Luffy looks at him with a smile, and Ace can't bring himself to ruin that. One morning though, Ace awakes to feather soft touches over his stomach. He opens his eyes to see that Luffy is tracing a circle over his ribs and stomach, a circle that marks a hole where Akainu's fist had once been. The blankness of his brother's expression and the emptiness in the usually vibrant eyes utterly disturbs him. Ace grabs his brother's hand, startling him from his dark thoughts, and pulls Luffy back down so that he's lying down on his side facing Ace. Luffy, what happened at Marineford? Ace knows what to expect, knows that his brother will be in pain. Despite that, he can't prepare himself for the complete sorrow and grief that covers Luffy's face, nor how he curls up into himself, nor how his grip on Ace's forearm grows tight and desperate. You know what happened at Marineford. Luffy's reply is soft, contradicting the harsh pain in his expression. I want you to tell me what happened. I want to know what you went through that day. No, Luffy says, voice clear and firm. Luffy, Ace presses. No, I won't, Ace, I won't. Please, Luffy, Ace beseeches. Why would you make me tell you that? Because I need to understand. You don't, Ace. How can I be at peace if I don't know what I put my little brother through? I can't make any peace with my crew, with everyone who sacrificed themselves for me. At least let me make peace with you. Luffy opens and closes his mouth twice, floundering at Ace's reply. The older boy knows that Luffy understands what he's saying. He also knows that Luffy can't deny him this. Me, Eva, Jinbei, Crocodile, Buggy, and all the freed inmates were on our way to Marineford on one of the Navy ships. When we got there a huge wave came out of nowhere and almost swallowed us. We rode the wave straight to the top, but right as we were getting close to you, everything froze into solid ice. The shelf broke and we fell into the battle. Ace listens as his brother explains all the blood and violence he witnessed in jilted, fragmented sentences. Despite the disjointed storytelling, Ace is able to match up Luffy's actions with what he remembers seeing from atop the executioner's platform. Luffy rambles on about the different people he saw at the battle, his old enemies, and the sheer amount of people he plowed through in his quest to rescue Ace. The more Luffy talks, the flatter his tone becomes, and the more Ace's chest aches. By the point Luffy's story reaches the top of the executioner's platform, every word from his brother's lips is tight with emotion. His voice cracks so much as he speaks about the key breaking and then the hope created by Mr. 3 and his candle copy, that he has to stop and clear his throat 3 times. I thought. Luffy cuts himself off before swallowing and trying again. I thought I saved you. Ace merely pets Luffy's hair. He's incapable of words. Sorry. Doesn't seem anywhere near enough to communicate all the regret, and guilt festers in his chest. Luffy shudders but continues on. His story dwells on them fighting together, and Luffy recites every detail of the fights blow by blow. Eventually though, Luffy runs out of material, and he reluctantly moves forward in the story. When his story progresses to the point where Ace committed one of his greatest sins by turning around to face Akainu, Ace is completely prepared to hear, at the very least, hints of accusation and anger, but he doesn't hear a syllable on the subject. Luffy instead speaks of how weak he was from the hormones, but how he should have been stronger, how he should have moved away when he realized he was getting weak, how he shouldn't have weighed Ace down. That nearly breaks Ace, but he's too numb to say anything as Luffy reaches the final leg in the journey. And you know what happened then, Ace? Tears are falling down Luffy's face, and have been for some time now. Ace does. Ace knows, and has stewed over every second of it with angst and self-loathing. But Luffy's self-accusation is something Ace can't let be. Ace holds his brother close, trying to be the comforting presence his brother needs as he feels sobs rack Luffy's small frame. Luffy, he murmurs against his brother's black hair. I couldn't save you, Ace, Luffy cries. I couldn't save anyone. Ace quickly assures his brother, hey Lu, I'm here, Ace presses, trying to calm his brother down. You died, Ace. It was okay, really. And no you weren't. Your blood was all over my hands and clothes and my hair and I couldn't get it out of my fingernails and I. Ace squeezes his brother tight before slightly pulling away from the embrace to look him in the eye. Luffy, it's okay. I'm here for you, okay. Instead of soothing his brother, it seems to start another round of sobbing. I'm sorry I couldn't save you. Luffy's cries. Luffy, you already did. Despite the circumstances, Ace's subtle joy lights his watering eyes. Luffy will never understand just how much he has done for Ace. Thank you, Luffy. He can't stop the smile, nor the tears, though he tries. Don't thank me when I let you die. Luffy shouts, voice cracking. His grasp on Ace's hand is so tight he's cutting off the blood circulation. Ace's eyes widen as he sees the sheer despair in his brother's eyes. Luffy, why did you save me? Luffy demands. Why couldn't you just leave me? Ace almost chokes out a laugh from the sheer ridiculousness of that statement. As if he would. As if he ever could. Their bond is his most precious treasure. Always has been. Ace knows that if Luffy died, he probably would have followed after. He doesn't think he is particularly weak for his choice because Luffy is just so important to who he is. Luffy taught him love, both how to give and receive it. Ace never understood what family was. He never understood what love was. And he never understood how anything could be so good, until Luffy came along with his stupid smile and forgiving nature, and taught Ace. Almost every good thing that happened in his life came after the fact. He would probably have never met his other family if it wasn't for Luffy, and even if he had, he could never have accepted his father's offer of family. With his fractured definition of the word, how could Ace even reconcile what a family was? Why it's so valuable, and what Whitebeard's offer really meant? No, he would never have understood. Though he loved Sabo, he found something in Luffy that he never realized he was missing, and his sweet little brother gave it to him without a word, without understanding it, and without a regret. Luffy gave Ace a base. Someone who he never had to prove anything to, someone who always believed the best in him, someone who always loved him. Luffy gave to him unconditionally, and that was something he would never find anywhere else. Luffy gives Ace a purpose, and a reason for strength. His little brother is something special. He possesses some inner power to change the people around him and keep positive. Ace wants to protect that. He wants to give back some of what Luffy had given him. Letting Luffy die was never an option. Luffy is a part of who he is, Ace's most treasured part. He doesn't know when it happened exactly. Somewhere, along the road as he began mellowing out, he started caring about Luffy. He started caring so much, caring more than he thought he could ever be capable of. Sabo's letter certainly nurtured it, and then there was the bear. Ace should have been better. And that is just another reminder why Ace could never let Luffy die, even if it came at the cost of his own life. Surviving and knowing that he was unable to protect the only pure thing in his life would be his utter undoing. He feels a pang of guilt at the thought of what his suicide would do to his other family and he lets it sit in his mind because he deserves it. Despite that, even with his nakama, he doesn't think he would be able to stay stable, let alone be happy. Luffy and Ace spent more time with each other than they had with anyone else in the world. Ace knows his brother in and out, and Luffy knows him the same way. There simply isn't another Luffy in the world, and Ace doesn't think he'd be able to handle a world without one. But Luffy is better than him, stronger than him. He knows Luffy can do what Ace can't, live without the other. Let you die, you have to be kidding me. Ace murmurs the reply into his little brother's hair. That's what an older brother's job is, to protect their stupid little brothers. Ace's reply only makes Luffy cry even more. His little brother burrows his face once more into Ace's shoulder and Ace just places a comforting hand on his back. After a time, Luffy's tears finally peter out. The weight in the air is dense and unsettling, and Ace is more than ready to put an end to Luffy's pain and stop the aching discussion. Before he can suggest they go hunting, Luffy's mouth opens again. "I don't remember a lot of what happened afterward," Luffy murmurs. "Your old man died, he was killed by Blackbeard. But he died standing proudly. He never bowed to anyone in his whole life." Ace's thoughts screech to a halt. He knows that his father's death was likely inevitable, but hearing it is another thing. But why is Luffy telling him this? Why is the story going on after Ace's death? "Jinbei told me a lot of this stuff because I was pretty out of it," Luffy continues on, unaware of Ace's inner torment. "When I woke up, I was in the Heart Pirate's submarine. Chirao actually turned out to be a doctor. He has the op fruit, so I suppose it makes sense. Anyways, I was in a bad way. I wanted to die, Ace. I wanted to die because I was without you." Ace nearly chokes on air at the admission as his brain struggles to catch up with what he is hearing. "But then Jinbei forced me to remember that I had my crew left. I couldn't abandon them and their dreams. We said we were gonna meet back up in 3 days at Sabayati, but I knew that we weren't strong enough for the new world. I wasn't strong enough for the new world." Luffy's hands clench and unclench. "So I changed our meeting time to 2 years. We would all train for 2 years so we would be ready for the new world. I trained with Rayleigh to learn all of the hockey on an island near the Island of Women. I trained so that I would be stronger, and 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 stronger and stronger." Luffy gasps, out of breath from his tirade. "I trained so I could protect everyone, so that I would never have to lose anyone again." Luffy's eyes grow hollow. "It seems that I never can get strong enough." Ace doesn't understand. He doesn't understand at all. He listens as his brother explains how he trained for 2 years, how he thought about Ace and his crew daily. When they all reunited, Luffy waxes poetry about how much his crew members had grown, and their new powers and techniques. He talks about their trip to Fishman Island, their adventure in Punk Hazard, and their triumph in Dressrosa. The last one makes Luffy pause repeatedly, as though he isn't certain of what to say. Ace distantly wonders what his brother thinks is so horrible that he has to leave it out. Mostly though, Ace is bewildered and numb at everything he hears. "Then, we ran into Blackbeard." Luffy's voice goes flat, completely bereft of the excitement it had just held as he spoke of his crew. Slowly, Luffy explains their naval battle, and the harm done to the Thousand Sunny. They were out of Kola, and couldn't escape. All of his crew fought valiantly. They were at a disadvantage of strength, but stood their ground. They could have won those battles through sheer tenacity and because they were Straw Hats, who never stayed down. But Blackbeard didn't play fair. Blackbeard threw one of his own crew members overboard and then used Luffy's split second of distraction to attack Nami from behind. Luffy was too slow to stop Blackbeard. Sanji saw the attack coming though and jumped to intercept it. His legs were burned by the blackness of the Yami Yami no Mi, and his opponent used the opportunity to crush his rib cage beneath his boot. Nami, who finally turned around, was stunned and horrified. Luffy wasn't in any better shape. Brook leapt forward to stop Sanji's opponent from attacking Nami. Brook, the humming swordsman, was fast, but he couldn't outrun the blades and guns of 3 opponents as Sanji's, Nami's, and his own enemies turned their attention onto him. His skull was cracked beyond repair. Nami slumped to the floor in horror, going into shock. Luffy ran forward, but the darkness emanated by Blackbeard smothered him, making his weak and slow. Blackbeard got to Nami before Luffy did, and then he shot her. Luffy pauses there and took a few deep breaths. Ace then realizes that his brother's heart is racing, and his young face flush with sweat. "I can't remember much of what happened next," Luffy admits slowly. His tone is dead. Ace thought that his brother's voice reached its lowest point, but he was wrong, he was so wrong. "Robin told me later that I just snapped. I killed most of Blackbeard's crew with hockey. I didn't know you could do that before." Ace didn't either. "I killed Blackbeard too. Robin told me that I made him suffer, so I suppose that was good, maybe." Luffy, Ace speaks, voice cracking from the emotions in his chest. His little brother continues on, as though he didn't hear Ace's call. "Everyone else lived, but after that, things were never the same. We all agreed to take a month off of our adventure as we tried to understand what had happened. Not that anyone could, but There was no explaining or accepting anything that had happened. His expression turned sorrowful. I never can protect anything, can I? Ace opens his mouth to reply but finds he doesn't have the air to. I was trying to figure out if I should kill myself or not when I met this lady. His brother's nonchalant words make Ace's world spin. This lady said that she could help me fix things. She said that she had heard about me punching the Tenryubito. Apparently her sister was enslaved by them and died. I did something she never could, and so she wanted to do me a favor. Luffy pauses as he rearranged his thoughts. Ace on the other hand is struggling just to keep a hold of his mind. Every thought is fleeing at the shock and horror that's slowly being revealed by every sentence of his brother's terrible story. She ate the wish fruit. Apparently, she can grant 5 wishes, but only for other people. She can't do anything for her own selfish motivations. I think she said something like that. She already used 3 of them, but offered me the 4th. I said yes. She said I could wish people back to life if I wanted, make myself a billionaire, become immortal. There were no rules. I could have wished you and Nami and Sanji and Brook back to life, if I wanted to. You didn't. Luffy shakes his head. I didn't. It wouldn't be enough. Everything was too beeped up to be repaired by that point. So I wished that I could go back in time to fix things. Luffy exhales as Ace tries to wrap his mind around the latest curveball. 6 months ago I woke up by the sea. You were shaking me. And for whatever reason, you were my ace. I didn't understand what was going on, but I do now. I know that I can make things better. The fire that Ace feared was long since extinguished flares to life in his brother's eyes. The gaze sharpens, tempered by pain and determination. His attention finally reaffixes itself back to the present, and for the first time in hours, Luffy is looking at Ace, and not through him, into another world, into another time. Whatever Luffy sees on Ace's face must be awful because his brother's expression morphs into anxiety and concern. Ace. Luffy begins, brow furrowed. Shish, Ace utters. I need to think about this for a moment. Luffy nods and rises, intent on granting Ace privacy. He doesn't get far before Ace yanks him back down. You stay where you are. Ace is distantly aware that his hands are trembling as he pulls his little brother into him. Ace and Luffy often slept on each other, but they rarely clung to one another in a more intimate embrace. At the moment though, nothing else is adequate for Ace. His mind wanders as he tries to make sense of it all. First and foremost there's the issue with what passes as reality. If he's to believe what Luffy is saying, then that means Ace is decidedly not in the afterlife. The alternative being, what, time travel? It seems more than a little ridiculous. People don't go back in time. He thought that, certainly, but Luffy's weight is warm in his arms. The salt of Luffy's tears is just beginning to dry on his thin tank top. Luffy's story. Oh God, Luffy's story. That is something Ace doesn't think his mind could ever imagine, and nothing an afterlife of any kind would create. The rawness of his brother's emotions and pain is too much, it's too real. A dream is completely out of the question by this point. The afterlife explanation begins to feel more out of the scope as his senses and mind were immersed over the months in Luffy and their childhood home. It seems so real. Ace has no preconceived notions about what the afterlife is supposed to be like, but he never imagined that it would be like this. So suppose he believes his brother, what does that mean? His Luffy went through hell after he had died, witnessed the deaths of his crew and contemplated suicide of all things. So Ace failed. It would mean he completely and utterly failed. It would also mean that the Luffy in his arms is actually his Luffy. He isn't a figment of his imagination, he's Ace's brother. It means that all along Ace was spending time with his Luffy, was sleeping and eating with his Luffy, was comforting his Luffy, is currently holding his Luffy. And Ace had no idea. But Luffy knew. Luffy had known all along, but he hadn't said a word, hadn't wanted to burden Ace with his problems. Maybe he also wanted to pretend none of it happened. Ace understands that. The jungle is so far away from the blood-spattered battleground of Marineford, the problem could never remain unaddressed forever though. The source of his brother's pain has slowly been encroaching on him whilst Ace was unaware. Left unattended, it began swallowing Luffy, his baby brother, his purpose for living. After everything Ace heard, he knows that he can't just leave it be. His brother needs more support than Ace ever imagined, even in his darkest nightmares. That is, if this is true. Can he really accept what Luffy is saying? If Ace believes everything that Luffy claims, then Ace's world will be forever changed. Why didn't you tell me any of this when you got here? Ace asks. Luffy burrows his head into Ace's shirt as though to escape the question. I meant to tell you, I really did, Luffy replies eventually. But you were so happy thinking I was still alive out there, and then you told me I was your proof. Muffled sobs come from his shirt again, and horror built in Ace's mind as understanding set in. I'm not worth being your proof. Luffy cries. I almost killed myself, Ace. I'm not strong enough, and I'm sorry, so sorry that I ruined your legacy. Luffy's grip tightens on Ace's shirt. This time will be different though, Luffy murmurs, sniffling. Things will be different. Ace waits for all of it to sink in, but finds that the information just floats around in his brain, cushioned by grief and terror. Luffy, do you really believe that we traveled through time? Ace asks softly. Yes, Luffy replies as he pulls a little away from Ace's embrace. You know how impossible that sounds, right? It's the grand line, Luffy says simply, as though that explains everything. Then again, Ace supposes it probably does. Stranger things have happened. He takes a deep breath. Even thinking about going along with Luffy's theory is beyond crazy, but then again, everything about this is crazy. What did you wish for exactly? That I could go back in time to when I was with you, my big brother. It's possible that this lady, whoever she was, picked Ace as he was in the future because he was the iteration of the big brother Luffy knew. Ace is his big brother, not the one from the other timeline that the two invaded. Beep. He's actually trying to apply logic to this chaotic and messed up story, isn't he? Please believe me, Luffy pleads. His brother is beseeching with him to accept what he is saying, and Ace feels like crying. Did she say anything else? Ace asks, trying to arrange everything in his mind. She just told me I'd get another chance. Another chance at life, Ace thinks aloud. It seems too good to be true. If he believes Luffy's tale completely, then what just happened is nothing short of a miracle. Ace realizes then and there exactly what opportunity has appeared before them. She sent us back in time, before all of it happened. We can change anything we want. We can save our Nakama. Luffy's eyes fill with similar determination and he nods solemnly. Ace grabs Luffy's face and leans his forehead against his brother's and stares at him right in the eyes. You and I are going to change the world. In that moment he embraces his brother's story fully, allowing himself to be swept away by the strong current. He expects doubt and confliction to rise in his mind, but instead all he finds is determination. He will save his Nakama. He will save his father. And he will save his little brother and ensure Luffy's happiness even if it kills him. Again. Luffy meets his gaze head on. No more regrets. No more regrets, Ace promises. I feel fine. After their painful discussion, things are forever changed. Neither boy ever directly references it again, but everything they speak of now has to do with what they need to do in the future, how things will go and how strong they need to be. Ace finds he no longer has the energy to talk about his Nakama and Oyaji, because every time he opens his mouth to tell a story, he remembers everything they need to do before he can see them again, all the things he can't mess up if he does want to see them again. The memories suddenly seem weighted down by something so incredibly heavy Ace fears he won't be able to lift it, like an iron curtain has been hung between himself and the future he longs for. No matter what he decides, he'll try anyways. With the future laid out before Ace and his brother, they both know there isn't a second to spare. They begin with physical conditioning. The fights they have are no longer just for sport, they're for training. Nearly every stop is pulled out, and both boys are left wounded, bleeding, and exhausted at the end of every day. They keep going anyway. Luffy surprises Ace when he tells him that Rayleigh taught him all three kinds of hockey and that his little brother mastered all of them. Ace has a moderately good understanding, but never trained in it as seriously as Luffy has, and so they decide mental conditioning must come next. Luffy found out early on that he still retained his power, but not his control. During the first day of training, he knocked Ace out on accident and was so incredibly distraught that Ace had to comfort his stunned brother for hours after the fact. It takes longer still for Luffy to come back around to the idea of training in Conqueror's Haki more. It is a terrific struggle for Ace and his brother to earn every drop of control they can manage. It takes a long time for them to reach a point where their control and physical conditioning is sufficient that they're immune to each other's Conqueror's Haki. Luffy offers a soft smile once and tells Ace that all he feels now is little waves of Ace and not his lethal willpower. After that, they focus on keeping it from affecting other people and creatures. Their minds started aching though from the constant use of willpower, but they plow forward. Of all the tools in their belt, Haki is by far one of the most important. Nights, if anything, have somehow gotten worse after the discussion, for Ace especially. He hates waking his brother up so often with the bad dreams and ghosts that haunt his sleep. Luffy needs rest, and the only solution would be to sleep apart from Ace, but the older can't bear the thought of sleeping without him anymore. Sometimes his brother's face is the only thing that keeps him from having a meltdown after dreams of his dead father and Nakama haunt his mind. 6 out of 7 nights in a week, the two wake due to nightmares, and more often than not the horrific images and trembles refuse to fade for hours afterwards. As they realize that there is simply no way to fall back asleep easily, they do the only thing they can to soothe their aching hearts: they train. They visit Makino less and less, because they can't afford to waste a single second, and eventually, their visits stop completely. Neither bother messing with Dayton and the bandits anymore either. They devote themselves fully to their mission. Everything fades into the background except for their goal and each other. Time moves by without either noting it with anything more than upset. Their time is gradually slipping from their fingers. Months pass and the outside world becomes a blur. Until a punch knocks them out of it. Ace and Luffy are taking a breather after one of their more intense fights when the fist of love descends upon them like righteous thunder. Both are too stunned by the attacker's presence to dodge or even harden their bodies with Haki. "You idiots!" The boys pull themselves off the ground with terrified expressions. "Dayton tells me that she's barely seen hide or hair of you in the past 3 months. I almost thought you two had run away. You need to check in with Dayton at least once a month so I know that you morons are actually here. I need to be able to find you if I want to train you into becoming strong Marines." Garp shouts. "Don't you mean, beat us into strong Marines?" Ace mutters irritably, grabbing his head. Somehow it doesn't matter how much time has passed, how much conditioning he's been through, Garp's fist still smarts more than any other punch he's ever gotten. He automatically reaches for his little brother so he can check him over. Underneath Luffy's hat there's bump on his brother's head, but what really concerns him is the wide-eyed look Luffy is giving their grandfather. Ace grabs his brother's hand and squeezes it firmly. In Ace's own mind, visions of his last memories with Garp flash painfully. Those final moments remain as crisp as the day they happened, and Ace will never forget the unfathomable expression on his adoptive grandfather's face, nor the pain in his eyes. Luffy's responding squeeze shakes Ace from his memories and he faces their grandfather again. Garp's eyes narrow as he looks between the pair and their joined hands. "What the hell have you two been doing while I was gone?" "Training," Luffy replies. "That's my grandkids. Training to become Marines, I'm sure." The last part sounds more like a threat than praise. "Yeah right, we're going to be pirates, Gigi. Give it up already," Ace snorts, mostly out of habit. Garp's expression grows predictably irritable. "Not on my watch." He sends his fist hurtling towards Luffy, only to have Ace immediately sense it and redirect it into the forest. Their grandfather is so shocked by Ace's observation Haki that he makes no move to dodge Ace's fist and is sent smashing into the tree. "Screw you, you shitty geezer," Ace replies angrily. "Don't hit Luffy." "Ace," Luffy whines, "I could have done it." Ace smiles unapologetically. The crashing sound of trees falling alerts them to the fact that their grandfather is back on his feet, and both of them jump as they realize what they've done. Garp's expression is complex, but the overall tone is one of anger. If Ace had actually been as young as he looks he would have missed the small points of surprise and fear. Fear because now Ace has just shown he possesses the same power his father had, and at such an astonishingly young age. Ace has no idea how to explain himself. "When exactly did you learn to do that?" Garp asks, voice quiet and intense. "The fire at Gray Terminal." Ace decides to tell the truth. Blue Jam was going to kill Luffy. To Ace's trained gaze, Garp's eyes soften a little in guilt and regret. The freckled boy can't bring himself to feel sorry for the old man. He deserves to feel a little guilt. What the hell was he even thinking leaving Luffy here in the first place? Ace thinks mutinously. I see. And what else do you know? Ace chews the inside of his cheek as he tries to figure out what he should reveal. Eventually he just shakes his head, deciding not to say any more. That's it. I just know that I can tell when people are coming. Ace can practically see the cogs moving in his grandfather's mind. Ace doesn't blame him for being so taken aback. Me too. Both Ace and Garp turn to face Luffy, who is looking at his grandfather with a carefully blank expression. Ace wants to smack his little brother for being so absent-minded, but he's more concerned than anything else for how their grandfather will react. Before he can say anything, Garp darts towards Luffy. Ace immediately moves to intercept, but their grandfather knows it's coming this time, and Ace's body isn't fast enough to avoid the rebounding hit. He's sent skidding through the trees, breaking the trunks of more than a few as he goes. He stands as quickly as he can, ignoring the stinging of his head. His eyes seek his brother and he's relieved to find Luffy is unharmed, standing a little to the side from Garp's still extended fist. What concerns Ace though is that their grandfather's hand is lodged in a tree, and Luffy's arm is coated in black from deflecting it. Armament too, Garp murmurs in surprise. Ace freezes in horror. He doesn't know what's going through their grandfather's mind, he doesn't know what the consequences of their actions will be, so Ace does the only thing he can think to. He runs to Luffy and stands in front of him. I'm going to guess you can do this too? Their grandfather asks. Ace doesn't reply, just glares at the older man. You two learned all this on your own. So what? Ace snaps. You boys have gotten strong. Garp rubs the top of his head, looking more tired than Ace ever remembers seeing. Stronger than I ever thought you two could get training on your own, especially since it's only been a year since my last visit. All of the unsaid implications echo in Ace's head. He should have been more careful. Garp's always done everything he can to keep them hidden, keep them away from the eyes of the world. But they've just shown him that their strength goes beyond most average pirates. What he'll do with that knowledge, Ace doesn't know. We need to be strong, Grandpa. Luffy's calm voice rings through the clearing. So strong that we never have to lose anything again. Their grandfather clearly isn't expecting this. A hint of understanding bleeds into Garp's eyes and Ace figures that he is remembering Sabo, which isn't true, not really. Grandpa, please train us. Ace sends an utterly alarmed look towards his brother. He hadn't thought Luffy would go so far as to ask Garp of all people to help. Then again, Ace probably should have known. There is nowhere that Luffy isn't willing to go to help the people he loves. Ace turns and looks towards their grandfather curiously, wondering what he will decide. Garp's always tried to keep them hidden while simultaneously doing everything in his power to make them strong enough to protect themselves. Garp has to know that one day their heritage will be revealed, and he'll be unable to protect them from the Marines. Everything's on the table now. Their grandpa can't just ask them to forget hockey. If he really wants them to be able to protect themselves, it makes sense for him to agree, but God, it's all just so ridiculous. Fine, Garp utters after a long breath, and Ace is so taken aback that his mouth falls open. Thanks, G-chan, Luffy pipes. Seriously, Ace says, because he can't believe this is actually happening. Yeah, but I tell you I've already been training you for years now. Ace scoffs. Yeah, dodging perhaps, but all of them knew it wasn't really training, even Garp, who looks weary. Despite the exhaustion, he turns towards them and scans them speculatively. Ace barely resists the urge to block Luffy from view as their grandfather's hard black eyes study their appearance. To get this strong in a year, you must have trained non-stop daily, Garp comments. Ace and Luffy nod. Well, stop it, Garp exclaims, knocking both of them on the head faster than they can dodge. What the hell, Gigi? Ace snaps, standing in front of his brother in case their grandfather decides to do it again. You two idiots, Garp shouts. If I wanted you to work yourselves to the bone I would have brought you along on the ship with me. Are you complaining because we train too much? Ace can't believe it. Damn straight, I am. Why? Luffy demands. You need social skills, you morons. Why else do you think I left you with Dayton? Dayton and the bandits, Luffy asks, completely disbelieving. Why you wanted us to learn social skills from the bandits? Ace's utter incredulity either goes over their grandfather's head or he just deftly ignores it. Yeah, exactly. The Marine nods. Not to mention the fact that both of you look like shit. When was the last time either of you actually slept? Luffy and Ace both cringe a little at that. It isn't that they don't try, the dreams just shake them up too badly. If they can't fall back asleep, it just makes more sense to start training at 2 or 3 in the morning. And Ace, I thought I told you to watch out for Luffy, Garp says, picking his nose. Ace feels horror sink into his being. His eyes immediately seek his brother and he's disturbed by what he sees. He had taken the bags under his brother's eyes as token. Given their bad sleep schedule, his own eyes are exhausted, too. The reason for them is so obvious that Ace hadn't considered them before. But it strikes him now that it shouldn't even be that way in the first place. Even if they can't sleep, training through the nights hasn't been a good idea, Ace sees in now, because his brother looks so worn down, and he doesn't know how to handle it. The various cuts and bruises are always treated with care by Ace, but as he looks at all of them together he sees what a mess his brother's body is becoming. No arm or leg is undamaged and most of his fingers are bandaged up. The worst part is why he didn't notice, because he's used to it, used to the way Luffy looks. He knows he himself probably looks no better, but as the older of the two he should have made them stop, he should be better. Luffy catches his hand and pulls it gently, forcing Ace to look at his brother's eyes. Ace, I'm okay. Ace shakes his head as the familiar level of self-loathing sets in. How could he be missing all the signs of abuse on his brother's body? Garp clears his throat, looking vaguely apologetic. That isn't what I meant, Ace. I know this thing with Sabo. Garp exhales wearily. Look, the point is that you need to take some time for yourselves. You can grow up and train to become strong Marines at the same time. Luffy coughs suddenly in a strange way that almost sounds like, never, from where Ace is standing, and the older of the two can't help but crack a smile. I'll train you too, Garp announces. But only if you both promise to stop training so hard. The Marines can't use dead men. He lets out a loud barking laugh. Neither Ace nor Luffy smile. Anyways, I'll be back in 3 months to check on your progress. That'll be when we start training. Check in with Dayton until then, ya hear? Garp says, already walking away, probably back to the bandits' hideout to drink the day away with Dayton, despite how much the two supposedly don't get along. Shut up, you shitty geezer. Ace replies irritably. Don't disappoint me, boys. The fist of love can drive home the message if words won't. Go away already. Ace is still panting when Garp's visage finally disappears over the hill. After their grandfather is well and truly gone, Ace turns his eyes back to his little brother. He stares dejectedly at all the scratches and scars. He knows Luffy isn't 7, not in his mind, and that probably has something to do with the way he was okay pushing his brother so hard. His body is still young though, and neither of them are treating it properly for that age. Both of them have always been unusually tough and incredibly resilient to both diseases and weariness, which Ace blames Garp for, and his stupid idea of training, which always becomes a matter of life or death. Despite that, their bodies aren't on par with their older constitutions. Thinking it over, he realizes that the struggle he's had matching his body with his mind and willpower makes a startling amount of sense. He's not old enough yet to have all of it. If he's still struggling with it, he can't imagine what his little 7-year-old brother must be feeling. Ace. Luffy pulls gently on his shirt, trying to get his attention. Everything's all right, Ace. I know, Luffy. It isn't, though, and Ace has a sinking feeling that things haven't been all right for a while, but if they can't continue on this way, then where do they go from here? There's a long pause before Ace exhales. Luffy, let's go get some ramen. There's another pause and Ace sees the slight conflict in his brother's face. To get to Edge City, they'll have to cross Gray Terminal. The expression doesn't last long though. Ramen, ramen. Luffy begins sing-songing, and they walk towards Gray Terminal. Luffy needs a moment to relax and Ace needs to sit and think. Ace doesn't expect to get into the restaurant because of their reputation for dining and dashing, a fact he only belatedly remembers after they reach the front of the ramen shop. When the waiter ushers them in with only a mildly disapproving look and leads them to a table, Ace is significantly disturbed. It's as he's finishing his first ramen bowl that he remembers that they don't have that reputation yet. He and Luffy beat up thugs for the most part when they were this age. They didn't dine and dash until they both got a little older, except for that time with Sabo. Luffy, Ace says as he sets down an empty ramen bowl. He rests it on his left, where 20 or so empty ramen bowls have been precariously perched one on top of the other in 3 neat stacks. Luffy asks, mouth full to unnatural proportions with noodles and broth. His brother is surrounded on both sides with ramen bowls, stacked unsteadily, making nearby diners stare at them with blatant concern and disgust. I don't think we should reveal Conqueror's haki to the old man. Luffy nods in response, understanding. I was also thinking we shouldn't tell anyone we can do haki at all when we set sail, Ace announces decisively. After the encounter with their grandfather, Ace knows that they need to figure out exactly how much of their power they're going to display. 2 rookies coming out of the East Blue with fully formed haki will cause quite a fuss. Luffy will get enough attention and infamy just from being him, as he had in their past lives. The haki will bring more trouble than it's worth. The last thing they need is extra attention, especially considering their famous heritage, which will surely come out at some point. They don't need any extra attention if they can help it. Why? The rubber boy speaks as he swallows the pouch of food in his mouth. We'll get too much attention. Your crew in particular won't be up to your level, so attracting the big fish would be a bad idea when you're just starting out. You have to start out slow until they can keep up with you. Luffy sets the ramen bowl to the side and nods solemnly in agreement. Everyone is gonna find out eventually, he points out. Well, until then it can be our ace in the hole. Besides, they don't have to know exactly how strong it is even then, Ace rebuts. That's true, Luffy says, getting excited again. We could keep our strength super secret and no one would know how strong we are except us. Exactly, Ace says grinning. You and me Luffy, versus the world. Yeah, Luffy's smile is bright, and Ace soaks it up. He hadn't realized how solemn the air around them was until his brother smiled. Ace has to admit that Garp may have a point as all at once he understands what his grandfather was getting at. When he and Luffy push themselves to the limit, they miss out on all the important things. They were so focused on the future that the present had been unknowingly slipping right through their fingers. No longer. Ace wants to take each and every moment with his brother and make it into something precious, something he will always remember. The first few months they were here were laced with wonderful moments. It's all a bit tainted by the knowledge of Ace's lack of awareness, but he still keeps a few of those memories close to his chest. But the past 3 months, all Ace wants to do is forget them. He can't though, because while he wishes that he and Luffy could continue jumping through the forest, visiting Makino, and bothering the bandits, he knows that they can't. The future is coming for them, eventually. They need to get strong before that happens. They've almost lost a year already, and they can't afford to dawdle. But seeing Luffy this way, so serious, so intense, it hurts. He needs to find a balance. Ahem. Both brothers turn and look at the waiter of the restaurant, bending and shifting to see him through the towering stacks of ramen bowls. They stare at him blankly, and he fidgets uncomfortably under the force of their combined gaze before he continues. How will you two be paying for this? Should I split the check? Ace and Luffy make eye contact for a brief moment before leaping over the table and dashing out the door. Shouts and cries of outrage follow them as they run through the streets of Edge Town. He and Luffy exchange looks before smiling. I am grateful for the food, thank you very much. They call back politely in unison, inciting more angry screams. Luffy begins laughing, happy and free, almost like when they first got back. Ace joins in, feeling the pressure leave his body. This is what he was missing. This is what's important. There's no point in growing strong if it comes at the cost of his and, more importantly, Luffy's happiness. The world will come for them soon, but until then Ace's one and only job is to make sure his brother is safe and happy. Ace grins widely. He'll try his best, and enjoy every day of it. To be continued. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video. And thank you all for watching.